So building relationship at scale is one of the key tenets, and it should be in every playbook for brands moving forward. Brilliant products does not translate to sales. If an investor is looking at it and saying community isn't important, then I don't think that investor really understands the landscape.
Welcome back to Venture Voices, a place where we deep dive into building cult consumer brands, those brands that capture our hearts and our wallets. So here's a question for you. What if the key to your brand's long-lasting success is not in just having really good product and smart marketing, but in how well you can bring people under your brand's umbrella? This is episode 2 of our season, and today we are uncovering a critical element of what goes into building a strong brand, a community. I am joined by our wonderful guest, Gaston Matani, head of member engagement at Mandala Club, a private members club in Singapore known for fostering creativity, connection, and collaboration. So great to have you here.
Thank you for having me on your show.
So let's dive straight into it. From your perspective, what makes a really good, thriving community, and what is the difference between a true community from a follower base?
I think we've really put a lot of emphasis now on the identity of each individual member of your community. I think if you really look at it from a community manager point of view, our job is really simple. It's to understand each individual within your community and find out what they're looking for and help them achieve that. And to do that at scale, it's not an easy task. You're not sending out EDMs. We know that doesn't work. You're not sending out mass WhatsApps. It's really taking the time to understand each individual and to engage them the way they want to be engaged. I think it's a very simple formula. You hear that. I mean, we're so quick to use terms like avatar or segments of your community, but truth of the matter is every individual within your community is different. And the only way to find that out is to build a relationship with them. So building relationship at scale, I think, is one of the key tenets, and it should be in every playbook for brands moving forward.
Building a relationship at scale, I love that. Many brands are just plastered on a wall and be like, this is our North Star, building a relationship at scale with our customers.
Absolutely, that's my North Star.
Let's look into what actually goes into building a community. What are the first 3 steps a founder should take when they are just starting out building a community? Imagine you are a brand founder and you know about the importance of community, but you don't really know where to start. What should you do?
I think understanding your key segment. I know that we just talked about the individual, but now if we can just come out a little bit of a macro view.
Zoom out a little bit.
I think it's really understanding the individuals. If you're selling something, if you're reaching out to a group of people, it's really about not understanding the way they're going to interact with your brand, but what are their major challenges in their life? If you see legacy brands, why they're struggling is they're still kind of, if you're a luxury brand, you're just doing the luxury thing.
Right.
But your consumer has changed. And now they're parents. Now they're thinking about, okay, how do we raise 3 children in this economy? So really understanding your consumer from a 360 kind of holistic human point of view is very important. I've heard this recently about world building. Brands are now starting to world build. And in order to world build, you don't look at one facet of the human. We're all multifaceted. So I think brands understanding that their consumer is now super complex. It's an individual, it's a human with multifacets. I think that's one of the key things, really understanding what all these little pain points, aspiration points even, they're not necessarily pain points. I think next is really understanding what your assets are. So really utilizing the assets that you have around the physical product or the physical service or whatever, right? So do you have other subject matter experts that you can bring on to add more value to your brand, right? It can't just be relationships really just built around that. You buy from me, and then that's it. That's so one-dimensional, right?
I remember I read a book way back then in university by Gary Vaynerchuk. The book was Jab, 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 Right Hook. He talks about how, as a brand, you need to keep delivering value. Like you offer free value, just like give, and only then you invite someone to buy, and only then you give them the right hook. I think many brands don't get that right. They just keep selling and they keep pushing the product without offering any value.
Absolutely.
And it's brilliant what you mentioned about world building, because so many brands, they only focus on their tiny little sliver of like where their brand touches their customer's life, and they don't think about everything else around it, right?
But your brand is so much more than just X, Y, Z. You know, tell that story. But find out also what is the story your consumer is interested in? I'm actually, in fact, this might be the last time I ever say consumer, what your community is interested in. And I think a lot of Brands have brilliant products. We live in a time now where brilliant products does not translate to sales. You can make it with your product can be made immaculately. But if you're not telling a story, if you're not building that narrative, if you're not including your community in your decisions, and being very upfront with them, very honest with them, honest on your flaws, honest on the whole journey, the behind the scenes. We love seeing the behind the scenes. You want to see the underdog brand.
Makes it
relatable. We're not all perfect and our lives are, what you see on a billboard. We all have struggles. And I think when you identify those struggles and you show them that your brand has struggles, that makes you so much more human and people want to support you.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. So how can brands with limited resources, you're a startup, you don't have a lot of headcount, you don't have a big budget.
Absolutely.
How can they engage authentically with their audience without overextending themselves and without starting to do things that maybe don't resonate with their community?
This is a question that I get posed a lot.
This is the $1 million question.
This is a $1 million question. A lot of brands are not starting up with big budgets. If you're coming up against luxury brands that have been around, and legacy brands that have been around years, you're never going to play in that ballpark.
Even they struggle.
Exactly, even they struggle. Absolutely. You see that now with retail. A lot of stores are empty. It just takes one walk down Orchard Road to see that it's not what it used to be, whether 1 year ago, whether 5 years ago, right? So what's the new landscape? So I think to answer your question, it's really leaning into the story of the founder.
Right.
That real purpose. What's the reason you're doing this? A lot of great brands start because there's something it's connected to a larger need and purpose in their life. Putting that front and center is super important. If you come on and your first value mission statement is we want to sell more product, I don't know that's going to...
It's not a non-starter.
Yeah, that's... So your North Star is super important. Articulating your brand values, your brand mission. I know it's so cliche to say that you work in a corporate setting, but I think those are super important because every decision you make past that has to be consistent with what you're saying, right? And the founder just being honest. We get on social media and we see the struggle. Brands we love seeing that. We love seeing 2016, I bought my first pair of shoes to sell, it sucked. And then 2024 now, I have my first retail store. You want to support those brands because you see the struggle is real, right? So coming back to answer the question, I think just that founder and the way the founder interacts with social media, with their community, the honesty of the founder, the vision of the founder, the empathy of the founder.
Authenticity.
The authenticity. Man, this is a word that we hear so much, but we really don't understand what that is. Don't be something you're not. Even if you're not cool, if you don't fall into the zeitgeist of society, it doesn't matter. Just tell your authentic story.
There's going to be someone who will relate to you. I've come across a lot of founders who feel like they're not cool enough, is trending at the moment, is trending at the moment. And they feel like, oh, no one's going to watch my stuff. No one's going to follow me. No one cares about my story. I'm not that type of person.
Right.
But every founder and actually every human being goes through some struggles. We all can relate to stuff like that.
We want to relate to something
we
like
want
that.
to relate to that. And I think if you accept yourself and say, you know what, I'm confident in who I am. I'm confident in my story. If the reason you started your brand has an authentic purpose in it, your purpose wasn't that, okay, I want to make $1 million and
I don't want to work for somebody.
Forbes 30 under 30.
Yeah.
If you started this brand because you genuinely want to solve a problem, you genuinely want to serve a community,
absolutely,
then put it out there, show what you're going through and people will follow.
I want to add just a small point before we move on. You brought the example of Gary Vee.
Yeah.
And I understand why founders feel less than, because if you're looking at TikTok and you see the 50,000 views, 100,000 views, you're looking at a very polished product.
Intimidating.
Very intimidating because the content out there is immaculate. One person can produce so much now. But what I like to do is go back to video one. Go to Gary Vee's video one because he'll tell you that he put a video out every day. He was selling wine or something. And it was not the Gary Vaynerchuk of this media conglomerate that we know of. It's one guy that had a wine store just talking about...
trying to sell his wine.
Exactly.
But
he kept at it, right? He kept at it. So I think he was authentic the whole way. He always spoke the way he did. And one day he had that moment. But that moment was built on the foundation of going at it every day consistently. I'm not saying post every day, I'm saying going at it consistently and just being very honest about who he is, right?
Yeah. And not be scared of being, cringe out on the internet. Like,
Yeah,
put your story out.
absolutely.
Just
Everybody
do
is
it.
cringe to somebody else.
Exactly. Just embrace your cringe.
Embrace your cringe.
So, building up on this point of founders being like engaging with their communities authentically, should every brand founder personally engage with their community, or is there a way for a founder to be able to delegate that while staying true and authentic to their brand and still being able to tell their story?
I think in the early days, so I believe in touch points. I talk about frameworks all the time. If you're one of my colleagues, if you're somebody I interact with, you hear the word frameworks come out of my mouth rather, like every day, maybe every other hour. And why frameworks are important. So it's consistency, right? I think what we do is we throw the big event of the launch party, we have the big drop or whatever that is, and then we don't do anything for 2 months, 1 month, 3 weeks, And I think if you're engaging with a community, you have to engage. So building these frameworks of touch points, whether it's a low touch point, a medium touch point, or a high touch point, that's very important. Do all the touch points have to be executed by the founder? I don't think so. And I think you will never scale if you're at every kind of gathering, answering every email. It's authentic, and you should be doing that when you're a small community. But I think the idea is, and I'm bringing back to the point that I said just now, find your assets. I always talk about divergent communities. Mm-hmm. So if you're a community that's centered around running, then maybe find another person that is good at, fitness, like understanding how knee joints work. Find another person that's good at nutrition. Now your community is divergent. They might be coming for the running, but they're learning so many other things. Right?
All the things that go around
Exactly. That's the world building. The founder is not the subject matter expert in what muscles to strengthen in your knee to run. So leave it to that person. The point here is if you execute all the touch points, you'll never scale. And having these assets of people willing to come in and speak to your community, and you barter with them. It's a small brand, you have no resources. Yeah. You barter with them. You say, hey, I'll come talk to your community about the power of brand. There you go, right? I'm a full believer in the power of we over the power of me.
No, that's such a great point. Building a framework about how to engage with your community, with your customer, all the way down from this is our community to each individual group, to each individual person. Invest the time in the beginning. Build that framework so that you know how we can engage with all these people, and then the founder can find the time to step back, maybe delegate certain tasks to someone else. Where can you deliver the value authentically to your customer, knowing how does that fit into their world, how does that serve their overall needs. But you as a founder, you don't have to be there 24/7. You can actually go and do something else, but you have invested the time to build that framework in the first place. Mm-hmm. And then the show runs itself because you've put it all on rails.
Exactly. And you're a founder yourself, so you understand this concept. You then go on to build a brand, build other things, right? And why these frameworks are important is there's a plan. It's just a plan for 6 months. Your community knows there's a plan. You're not just like you woke up one day, you decided, we should have an event next Friday. Like having consistency, building, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, but building the ritual of spending time with your brand, building that ritual is so important. They must be engaging with you at least once a week. However they're engaging with you, it's really up to your framework. Is that a low touch point? Is that a medium touch point? Is that a high touch point? But you want your community to build a ritual. So later when we talk a little bit about examples of brands, I have a beautiful ritual that I want to share with you.
That's great. If you've got the example, I would love to hear it.
So a community that I really, really love, and I'm not alone in this, I can tell you everybody loves them as well, is Duolingo. How did Duolingo go from an app that was meant to teach you a language to now a cult brand with every chapter around the world being a satellite that is throwing their own parties, having their own games, hanging out together, doing their own rituals, right? Is they got people into the habit. And Near EL speaks about this a lot, getting them hooked, which is they're coming back to your brand. They're coming back to your brand is giving them value outside of this goes back to giving. Why giving is so important. I know some people in my life, and no names, won't mention any names, who are on streaks that are like 1,900-day streak.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They can't speak a word of Japanese. They're on that streak, but they keep coming. So how do you do that, right? I think if you really dissect that brand, you'll see a masterclass in ritual. People in different cities are renting Duolingo owls to go to concerts together. When they pan to the crowd, you see a bunch of these owls just going, my God, how much brand equity is that? You can't pay for that kind of marketing. This goes back to a very important point. After the founder has cultivated ambassadors within your brand, it is super important to have horizontal touch points within your brand that are no longer executed by your team. They're executed by the culture. Invest in world building. Think of your brand as not just the one thing, but think of it in a divergent way. Think of what are the other things that I can be solving? What are these other aspirational points I can be providing for our community, right?
Let's pivot for a second and talk about addressing some of the investor concerns when it comes to looking into brands and their communities. A lot of investors, while they on the surface understand that, oh yes, of course, community is important, they don't always see the value because it doesn't always translate to a direct ROI. It's sometimes challenging to measure success of your community. So if you face someone who is, let's say, a skeptical investor who doesn't really see the long-term value of a community, how can founders prove a tangible ROI of a loyal community?
That's really interesting. Yeah. So I understand being part of quite a big business and having run businesses as well. I understand that ROI is everything, right? The health of the brand is dependent on how much revenue the brand can. Obviously, you want to grow, you want to scale, you want to hire people. So I think this goes back to the hiring process and the internal structure of the founder from the very beginning. I think we've conflated a lot of positions together. So now marketing is generally social media, but social media is also community. So I think it's about going back to the beginning, even before the founder is conceiving this idea, even before they go for this general like elevator pitch or asking their friends and family what do you think of this idea, or finding the market. It's important to start thinking about community from that point, factoring in community from the very beginning. I think when you do that, then it's very easy to, if I would say even before, when you're thinking about, okay, I want to start this brand, already ask yourself, who are my first 500?
Yeah.
Who are my ambassadors? Who are these people that are going to make the core of my community? Really build that. And I know I said individual, but I'm going to use the word avatar. Who is that avatar? And really, really build that out and factor that into the pitch. If an investor is looking at it and saying community isn't important, then I don't think that investor really understands the landscape that we're in right now, brick and mortar retail, even online retail. We should all be doing what run clubs did in 2024. How did the brands like Satisfy, these big running brands, you see a ton of them, how did they go from being on the shelves of a mass market or multi-label store to having thousands of people wearing them and running and being together? That's the impact of community, right? You have these local domestic ambassadors that all of a sudden have a little Satisfy cap or have a little cult running brand. People are like, oh, what's that? And they're running together. They're building it together. I know I'm not getting to the direct answer, but I think all that has to be communicated from the very beginning. And I think that point, even when you're establishing the zeitgeist, or rather establishing the fundamental tenets of the brand, I think community should already be. The brand is, it's so funny to say community is the product. The brand is just a vehicle.
Yeah.
We're really flipping, right? Really, really think of the community as a product. I know we shouldn't be talking about monetizing human beings and monetizing community, but essentially we talked about that ROI, right? There's a brand I really love. I mean, I love them so much. They're called Bandit. Bandit Running. During the Olympics, they sponsored athletes that weren't sponsored. They had a plain black jersey.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. It's marketing that was unintentional. And they said, hey, you know, we want you to wear these Bandit ones because you see all the great runners, sprinters, they're decked out in Adidas and Nike with great brands. They felt bad. Not bad, but, you know, these are great athletes themselves. If you make it to the Olympics and you're eighth, you deserve it. That is hard work. That is endurance. That is absolutely putting 1% better every day. And they just put them in just black garb, just black top, black bottom. And that went viral. That got more coverage than all of Nike.
Even all those big brands that did all the sponsorships.
Exactly. Spot on. Actually, people then went, hey, you know, I'm the underdog too. I'm not the fastest runner. Maybe bandits for me. So they came about it in a, yes, the brand was important. They make very nice running gear, but community was the product. All their ad campaigns had people with people. Some of them didn't even have running. There's two people having a coffee, sitting at a coffee shop. Right?
Types back to that world building, right? It's like when I go
Absolutely.
for a run with my buddy, afterwards we'll go get a coffee. So then when you see an ad creative that's not focused about like, oh, performance, this is the fabric,
My
but you
God.
see two people having coffee, you're like, oh,
I
this
have
is for me.
coffee.
I do that. Maybe I should buy this t-shirt because this is the brand that isn't all about performance. but it's-
Performance, yeah. I mean, let's face it. I think every brand can adopt that world building.
Yeah.
Their store in Brooklyn is amazing. You
Yeah.
go there and it's like almost like a co-working space in their brand store or outlet. There are little computers you can use, books you can read. You can go in, just get a coffee, sit there. You can go in with your own laptop, bring your own coffee. No one's gonna ask you to buy a top or a pair of shorts, and that's where community congregates, right?
And I love that. Like I love like the concept of. I know we're like skewing into the like complete
Oh
tangent.
man,
here,
this could be a
but
5-hour podcast.
it's gonna be like episode 1 of episode 2. But going back to your example with Bandits Retail, I am a huge fan of retail spots which are a multi-use space where it's a place where you can create that world around your brand where your person not only comes in and it's a transactional space but it's a space of interacting with your brand, it's a space of interacting with each other or seeing some elements about your brand which are not necessarily just your product but maybe there is some art, maybe there is some music,
Your
maybe there
values.
is your values.
What are your
and you feel
values?
like,
Yeah,
do I
absolutely.
belong
What's your
in this
mission?
space? I feel like I belong to this space. I see all the things that resonate with me. I belong in this brand. I want to buy something.
You
from
just
this
said
brand. Belong.
Yeah. If I can give one free kind of tidbit here, it's if we're talking about divergent community, one of the key divergent points should be people meet people. If your brand can execute belonging and people meet people, these are your leagues ahead, right? Because so many brands are again looking at the transactional top down, me, you buy, I sell. But man, if you can find that horizontal touch point of people meet people, you're absolutely on the right, And this one thing I know, I'm answering like 5 questions at one time. I think one last thing I want to, just to close up this point is with community, don't expect 5,000 people at the block. Your brand is built on one person at a time. Do what doesn't scale to scale.
Building on this point, some of the common assumptions that founders have is the bigger the community, the better. Now, what do you think about that?
I think if you have a big community, great. But how are you managing their data?
Right.
2024 was the year of data. Everywhere you went, you heard data, 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 data. Large language models, data, 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 data sets. Why is that? I mean, brands have had CRMs for years, tens of years. I come from hospitality. Hospitality has CRMs, but how are we utilizing those CRMs? If you have 3,000 people in your community and they're in a WhatsApp chat, and you have 15 people in that WhatsApp chat talking, and if you throw in an event, 100 people come for the event, and 2,900 people don't attend, what does that mean? Does that mean you have a community of 300 or a community of 100? So if we're really looking at it with the fundamental point of one individual at a time, how are you capturing 3,000 people's worth of data so you understand them enough to apply a aspiration point to them?
Right.
So yes, eventually you will have to get to 3,000, but it should be built 10 members at a time, because then you're understanding all their data points, you're collecting data points, you're understanding their tagging. So tagging is something brands should be using, absolutely using. It's really, a tag could be, mom, right? Or it doesn't have to be likes the latest fashion or into pantsuits or things like that. I mean, I'm not the most trendy as a pantsuit, but it really should be that these other aspiration points. We talked about understanding this holistic ecosystem of the human, these things. So in the future, your brand can do something magical for them. Can you imagine if your brand reaches out to you and say, hey, by the way, In one of the events, you talked about your struggles with being a parent and managing your career, and also, you want to have another kid, and it's an expensive time now. Hey, this is another person that's going through something similar and that overcome it. I would love to put you two together. Can you imagine
Now
how
that's
you would
golden.
feel?
You'd feel so seen.
You'd feel
like
seen, exactly.
the amount of emotional connection that then is generated between that person and that brand is immense.
Exactly.
You feel like that brand understands you. You feel like they see you. And then that's when you want to keep coming back to them, because you say, if I want to buy whatever that brand is selling, your planners, lip gloss, whatever, product itself actually doesn't matter at that point. But you feel like, okay, that brand sees me. They see
Yeah.
my issues,
I
they see my
belong here.
struggles.
I belong here.
I belong here.
Yeah.
And you
Remember,
want to keep coming
the
back.
community is the product, right?
Community is the product. It's not
Yeah.
about the lip gloss and the planners and the
Absolutely.
laptops.
So
but
that's why your CRM systems, to whatever you use out there, you have to be able to, your community team, your marketing team have to be able to capture tags. And some tags are, you're gonna ask, do we send out EDM? Do we send out? We don't have WhatsApp. Sometimes they're just on mailing lists. Well, we have Instagram. If you can see who they are on Instagram, you can kind of do a little soft stalking. You can create these tags. So in the future, when someone is interactive with one of your posts, you go and look at their Instagram and you say, oh, wow, they might like this particular other event that's nothing to do with our main product. We could be a thought leadership series around being organized. Then you just send them a private DM and say, hey, we're actually throwing this little get together with members. It's around something I think you might like. Would you like to attend?
Yeah.
Nothing about selling a product. That's part of the giving.
delivering the value to
And then we get that, right? We get, oh, wait, how did you know? Or, wow, you're reaching out to me? Brands are, individuals are not used to, we're not KOLs.
Yeah.
I'm not an influencer. If a brand reached out to me, I would be like, wow, I only have a couple hundred followers. So I think that power, that ability to surprise and awe, which is a very hospitality term, I think that surprise and awe is so, so, so important, right?
And it's so interesting that you mentioned this, because I have a background in influencer marketing. I started my career off, I had an influencer marketing agency. And what you mentioned about doing events for your customers, I honestly see this as a huge trend for 2025, where the brands are not going to have influencer trips anymore, but they're going to have community trips or community events where you treat your customer as if they were an influencer. You invite them on these trips, you invite them to these events, you treat them with as much respect and care as if they were an influencer. That's how you foster that really strong community and create all those emotional connections with your brand.
I love that. For 10 people.
Yes.
The coverage that you'll get, if you put on your socials, hey, we just got to get together with 5 people and we did this. We all brought a cake. We ate the cake,
It's so authentic, and it's going to go so much further
Wait,
than
I do that with my
polished
friends at my
campaign.
house, That's incredible. Hey, you know what? Wouldn't it be crazy if Fendi did a card game night?
Yeah.
Like, hey, everyone, let's come and play Uno together. It's fun. It's
People would
quirky.
love
It's
that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how that would be far more viral than if Fendi say, oh, we're doing a spring summer show at this beautiful
And all
venue.
these
It's nice,
beautiful
but it's
events.
expected, you
Yeah.
know? But man, Fendi at someone's house, the Fendi Duolingo at someone's house playing Uno. I mean,
That's
come on.
fire,
That's
right? No,
fire.
that's
That
it.
is fire. It's sometimes we get too serious. We take ourselves too seriously. It's a tough world. It's a tough time. Political climate is not great. Just do something interesting. It doesn't even have to be professionally done. Just something really grassroots like that. I think it's the key here.
So building on what you said about being able to have a CRM of your customers where you can put tags and like knowing who your customer is, another common assumption that founders have is that brand communities require a lot of tech and investment. What do you think about that, and what are some of the tools that either you use or you think founders can use that are not custom built and big and expensive?
Oh man, I'm going to shout out some really cool tech solutions that I've used that do the job and for not a lot of money. I get it, there are a lot of these big CRM systems like HubSpot or Salesforce that are really B2B, but on an enterprise level, that's a big commitment. So I think like right out of the box solution for a CRM is Folk, Folk. So Folk is not sponsored, but great solution. Has everything that you need. And then it's just being diligent about it, right? I mean, yes, there's so much automation when it comes to SEO, social media, and all that. So I think all of that is still massively important. But if we're talking about technology in the specific function of a CRM, then just being diligent and putting those touch points and putting those tags in, that's all you need. So the community manager may not necessarily be the good time human, but they're the organized human. The person that's really managing large data sets and empathetic. They have to be empathetic. Something I say to people and they look almost shocked. Community management is a hospitality role. You're serving community. That makes you no different from a reception at a hotel or a cabin crew. You're serving, right? So obviously you have to be very empathetic when you're serving people. But going back to the technology, I would say I like Folk. I think Folk it does the job. I think it has integrations with email as well as maybe WhatsApp or one of the chats. I know they're working on something like that. I would say doesn't cost a lot of money, but manage your data. Manage your data.
And then in terms of where do you actually have a space for your community to give them a chance to interact with one another? Do you have to use one of those big fancy platforms like Circle or something like that? Or would something like even WhatsApp? What is your recommendation for founders?
It really depends on who your community is. I mean, I'm older. I'm older millennial. I'm 43. So
You don't look a day over 40.
oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I would say it really depends on your community. If you're Gen Z or younger millennial, you're probably up for adopting new technologies. So that could be a Circles, Mighty Networks, Kajabi. You know, these are great platforms, but community can engage with one another. But if your target is slightly older and super busy, we're all busy, but then maybe the traditional WhatsApps work too. I mean, WhatsApp community, Mandala manages our circle. I think combined, we have about 1,200 of our members in circles. And these circles each they each reflect one of our programming points. So that's entrepreneurship, women, youth 30, fitness, etc., etc. Our community is on WhatsApp. So we go to where they are, right? So I really think it's about assessing who your demographic is and applying what you think would work with that. There's no one solution here.
No, enough how you say assess where your community is and go there. A lot of brands almost force a certain way of communication with the brand onto their customer without thinking what is the habit that's already in place. Like if you're talking about Gen Z, younger millennials, they don't mind downloading another app, or maybe your particular customer is someone who is, I don't know, very techy, very geeky, they would love another app.
Absolutely.
Great, do it.
Absolutely.
But if you know your customer, it would be just another hurdle for them to overcome or another app for them to open. They're not going to do it. Then rather go to where they are.
Absolutely. Always go to where they are.
Always
Make
go
it
to where
as super, as easy, as frictionless to access your brand. Just simple as that, I think.
So now let's do something fun. Let's do the fill in the blank blitz.
Oof.
So let's do a few of these ones. This is going to be very fun. So I'm going to start the sentence, and in the end, there'll be a blank, and then you can fill out the blank. When it comes to community, one thing brands always get wrong is
Talking at the consumer.
talking at them instead of talking
To them, with them.
The most overrated piece of advice about community building is...
Oh my God, this is controversial. You're going to need a KOL to carry your brand.
Right.
Yeah. I think now we're the time of telling authentic stories. People want to see humans telling authentic stories. I was reading a really interesting stat a couple of days ago around Gen Z. So I think it was 70%, 72% of Gen Zs trust influencers and KOL more than traditional celebrities or traditional news sources. If you're about to go for a KOL, don't go for a KOL that has the biggest audience. Go for the one that is most aligned with your brand values. Look at that person and the way they live their life, and you go, that's exactly the consumer I want, the community I want to build.
And they can portray my message
exactly,
the best.
because it's authentic. They'll tell an authentic story. And if you don't, you tell yours, you know? I know it's not that easy. Of course, navigating this landscape is incredible. So if you have the budget, get a professional.
Yeah.
Get somebody who understands it, work with people who grow brands, grow with people who don't make your marketing person wear multiple hats. I think that time is kind of over, especially not the community role.
And let's do one last one. The best advice you ever got was?
I would say be okay to make mistakes with your community. You're never going to get every touch point right. But I think really reassessing the feedback, listening, feedback is amazing. If you do something and it bombs, talk to your community, ask for feedback. Say, okay, let's try this thing again. And be very honest about it. Hey, we're trying new things. I fail a lot at Mandala Club. I do events where nobody comes, and I'm like, why?
No
I thought this
way.
was gonna be fun, you know. But it's often, I forget that you do it for them. Everything is for your community, right? So sometimes I forget. Hey, I like this thing. Maybe not everyone does, right? So really being okay to fail, to do things that are gonna fall, get up and go, hey, we did it, we tried, we're fallible, let's move on to the next thing. As long as everything is aligned with that kind of bigger purpose, value system, brand narrative, you'll be fine. Just be honest with
It
them.
all goes back to that openness and authenticity and honesty as a brand. Just keep talking to your audience in an authentic, open way. Yeah, if you messed up, just say, we tried a thing.
We tried a thing, And one, I think, since we're kind of coming to the end, there's another brand that I think does an amazing job, rather. It's called Liquid Death.
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar
It's a
with Liquid Death?
major case
So,
study, yeah.
Man, people always talk so this is going back to what we said about product. We think that, oh, you have the best product, well-made product, artisan-made product,
Sparkling
incredible.
water.
It's sparkling water. Now we go back to the investor question about how does the founder convince the investor? Look at Liquid Death. That's water. It's water. People are paying $6, $7 for water, right? That is the power of community. That's the power of world building. That's the power of just being fun, doing some crazy animations. They have people in pickle suits and they do a skateboarding competition. I mean, that's
Amazing.
It's so fun, and that's exactly what we need a lot more of, right?
Thank you so much, Gus, for joining me this episode.
Thank you for having me.